Hello out there, and today we're taking a look at this CRKT Vizzle, number 5320. And the Vizzle is a new for 2017 design that was never really on my radar. Wasn't one that I thought I was going to pick up, mostly because of, just some of the aspects of the knife just don't match up with what my preferences are. And I remember seeing this in some SHOT Show videos where CRKT was rolling out their 2017 line, and I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, that's a pretty cool looking knife, but probably not going to be for me, and I'll pass. And that started to change when I got the CRKT Pilar. And the Pilar, as you might remember, was a huge home run for me, still is. Absolutely love that knife. And, it's also designed by Jesper Voxnaes, who made this Vizzle. And so immediately after getting that knife, I started looking at some of his other designs, and this started rising up the list. And then once I had the not so positive experience with the CRKT Ox, I wanted to get a new CRKT in my hands ASAP, just to sort of bounce back from that. And so this knife got released at about that time, and I picked it up. And guys, I'm really glad that I did. Really glad that I did. I had really low expectations for this knife because, again, just wasn't the type of knife that I usually gravitate towards. But the moment I unboxed it, I knew I was going to really like it. And then every moment and every time I held the knife since then, it just has gotten better and better and better and better. In my mind, at least. And that's a great thing to be able to say about a knife. And there's a lot of little touches and characteristics with the design of this knife that just add to that feeling, and make me really happy with this purchase and with the value of this knife. And so over the course of this video, we're just going to touch on all that stuff and, talk about some of my observations over the first couple days of having it and hit the specs as well and hopefully have a good time. But yeah, if all you want is a quick first impression, it is a good one. So there's that to go with. But let's jump into how this knife is going to look if and when you ever unbox it. And a lot of times I forget to show a knife in a closed position, and a lot of people like to see that, and it just is something that I overlook. But with this knife, it's really important for me to show it because this one looks really good. It looks really good closed. It's just an attractive knife closed. I've had a couple people remark to me that it reminds them of like a Quaken design, how the blade almost buries itself completely in the handle, which is very cool. What I thought of the first time I saw it was the CRKT Swindle, which is a favorite of mine and one that I really like, and that blade completely disappears in the handle, and I love that aspect of it. And it really makes the knife streamlined. Now, the next thing you'll notice when you hold this knife for the first time is that it is a little bit on the dense side. It's pretty heavy, especially in the closed position. This is not a short knife, and there's a lot of weight because of the stainless steel frame lock. And so, that's definitely something you're going to feel when you hold it in the closed position. So let's get the weight while we have this knife closed. And it's going to jump in right at around 4.6 ounces, 4.6, 4.61. All right, so a little bit on the heavier side, but again, when you have a stainless steel frame lock, there's really no way to avoid it. And you can see that this knife is pretty thin, and also, it's not like tall either. So it's minimalist as far as the amount of steel there is, but there's just, with the length of the knife, there's no way to avoid it. So quick sneak at the IKBS opening, which is awesome on this knife, by the way, and we'll talk about in just a minute. But here's the knife open, and what you have is a 3.25 inch blade length here and an 8 inch overall length. All right, and before we talk about the steel, I just want to touch on that length also, because that might not seem like too big of a knife, but it is, for the blade length, a little bit on the longer side compared to a lot of other knives that you'll find out there. And just conveniently, the day that I unboxed this knife, I happen to be carrying the ZT-0450, and you can see a very, very similar blade shape here. All right, similar belly, difference on the swedge and the flats and all that, but just a really similar length and shape to the blade. But looking at the back end, look at the difference in the length of the handle. All right, so me having medium to small hands, this ZT fits perfectly in my hands. But if the handle was any smaller, it would be a problem, and if my hands were any bigger, it might be a problem. And so, even though you're getting all that added weight, ergonomically, it should help with the Vizzle here just having that extra space in order to get a comfortable grip for anyone with larger hands. So there definitely is that benefit, you know, and I have heard some people say that the 0450 is just not the knife for them because it's too small, and so this might take care of that in a couple ways. So very cool to have. All right, and now talking back about the blade, the specifics of it, we've got 8CR13 MOV, which CRKT does pretty darn well, and we have a hollow grind on this blade, and it's just a really good, sharp-looking blade. I love the finish on it. They do a nice satin, as you can see, really reflective right there, and no jimping, and we have a flipper open only, and we are running on IKBS ball bearings as we work our way back from the blade. So very smooth opening. And when I unboxed the knife, I was a little bit concerned at first when I opened it because it did take a while for this one to break in. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is the worst IKBS I've ever had. And then 5 minutes later, I was like, all right, here we go. Good to go. You know, so it did take a little bit of time, but this one does open really nice and smooth. Really nice and smooth. Good action on it. Yeah, no issues with that whatsoever. All right, and then moving further back, talking about the stainless steel frame lock, one of the really nice touches that I saw, was from this screw right here. You know, and when I looked at the knife, I was like, how nice and minimalist. I love knives that don't have a lot of screws, and you can see we've got the pivot here and then only 2 screws, body screws on the other side to hold the back spacer and to the other side of the frame. Great. So what's this screw for? And I was like, what is this screw for? And then when I looked at it from the top, what I saw was that it is a lock side over travel stop, and it's inside the frame, which is really neat. It's a nice touch that it's not this ugly thing that's on like the outside of the frame. You know, it's something that's hidden inside, and all you have is this little screw here. So really makes the knife more streamlined, avoids any kind of like any clutter and messiness that this design would be burdened by. So I really appreciate that. And it was a nice touch to have, again, on a budget knife. And then another thing you'll notice as we move back on the frame is this little circular thing, divot, let's say. All right, and there's a little bit of texturing here, and for a moment I couldn't really figure out what that was for, you know, and one of my big concerns when I said that this knife was not to my preference, let's say, my 2 big concerns were, one, the weight and the stainless steel frame, because I like a little bit more grip when I'm holding a knife. You know, I don't like a scale to be that slick, and so that's one of the most bothersome things for me whenever I do have a frame lock, is that, you know, my hand sort of slides around, and I don't care for that. You know, I like a G10 or even an FRN or glass filled something, you know, and so that's why I was going to avoid this one. And I couldn't figure out what this little divot was for, and then I realized that it is most likely for getting a good grip on the knife. And it's not while you use it, it's while you're not using it. So let me explain. So another knife that I can bring in that has this feature is the CRKT No Time Off. And this is a Flavio Icoma design, and I remember when this knife came out, there were a lot of people asking him, what are these holes for? Is there like a piece or a machining part that's supposed to be in here? Am I missing like a piece of the knife? You know, like, why are these here? And what he said was that since it was a shop knife, what he wanted to be able to do, and let me try to get this in focus, what he wanted to be able to do with the knife was move it around, you know, use these holes to like flip the knife around in your hand and get a good like purchase on it and move it from like one end to the other and to be able to actuate it quickly. You know, so you can pick up the knife at any place and then use the hole to spin it around, whatever, get it open, good to go, if that makes sense. And I'm not sure if this is the exact intention of this hole. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it, but it seems to me to be a very similar kind of thing, where this is a very slick frame, but this has a little bit of traction, and you can grab the knife and like flip over, you know, and actually not lose your handle on it as you move it around in your hand. So that's what I think it's for. Otherwise, I'm not sure why it's there, but it does have a little bit of texturing on the recessed little circles as they go down. So I think that's the point. I don't know. If anybody knows any more detail about that, definitely mention it in the comments. I'll pin that so that everybody can see it, because definitely something that I'd like some feedback on. But that's just what my observation is, because again, I've seen something similar to that, in the past. All right, so that's definitely a plus, that even if it's not the intention, you can use it for that. And so it does help ergonomics a little bit too, because you can get a finger right in there when you hold it, which is nice. All right, so talking about the ergonomics, there's some pluses and minuses here. You know, my biggest opportunity, the things that I see that could be improved the most are definitely ergonomically, just because of the slickness. A little bit of jimping on this would definitely have been nice. Unfortunately, it's not there. But still, a very comfortable knife in the hand, and I don't have any issues with hot spots, at all. Any way that you hold a knife, no issues with hot spots. Another thing, and a thing that I'm really happy about, is that this forward choil is formed out just enough to make it functional. So a lot of times you see this quality on a knife, but it's not big enough to keep you from cutting your finger if you were to try to actually use it. And on this knife, on the Vizzle, you actually could use it. You know, push your finger hard against the other side of the flipper, and you can cut without cutting your finger, and there's enough room there. So that's awesome. Gives you an opportunity to choke up a little bit and really lock the knife in better, than it would if it were back here. So I really appreciate that. Still, it doesn't make ergonomics great, especially for someone who has hands that get sweaty the way mine do, but it does improve it a little bit and make it a lot easier to use. The last thing, and the last final touch that I really enjoy about this knife, is this backspacer. And usually what I see with backspacers, especially cheap ones, is that they're just throwaway material. It's just there to take up space. But this is done nicely, because the way that it sits in the back of the knife and the way that the texture is, it actually provides a little bit of comfort and a little bit of grip without being sharp at all. And so it keeps the back of your palm locked into the top of the handle. So it's actually a very good functional backspacer. And as far as backspacers go, it's one of the best ones out there, because it actually adds to the usage of the knife. So I definitely appreciate that. Final thoughts as far as usage goes and action. We have a really nice lockup, really good centering. The IKBS is absolutely fantastic. And so this is one of those things, again, when I'm thinking about the previous knives that I've had, like the CRKT Ox, let's say you're thinking about spending money on a new knife, and the difference between this one and a knife like the Ox is $10, if that. This is way more than $10 better than that, and that's the kind of stuff that I think about all the time, is that, hey, the cost to the consumer is a little bit more, but there's a lot more bang and a lot more functionality out of this knife. All right, we've got a one-position pocket clip that I forgot to mention. It carries really nice and snug. Tip up, so most people won't have any problems with it. I'm a lefty, and I'm only able to carry on the right side, and maybe at some point I'll talk about that and why I carry that way. But I don't have any issues with this clip whatsoever. I like it a lot too. So yeah, that's the overview. It went a little bit longer than I expected it to, but again, I just had a lot of things that I noticed that I liked about this knife. So I'm definitely recommending it at this point. I might do a follow-up if that's warranted, just from the way I use it. But I will follow up with you if it is necessary. So any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, you know where to find me. Hit me up in the comments down below. If you do have any information about this, if you think I'm right, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm crazy, definitely let me know about that too. But I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching, and I will talk with you again soon. Take care.